One of the things that caused us to start the Yukon project was when we had reviewed about 11 million TransUnion credit reports, right?
Yeah.
Is that about right? We started to find these nuggets, and we want to bring these nuggets to you so that you can learn from this. And today's topic is actually very fascinating. And we're going to be talking about credit utilization. And the case study we're going to walk you through today is a gentleman who went from 500 to 700 credit score in 8 months by making one phone call.
I know that's going to sound gimmicky. It's going to sound crazy. This is real data. This is a real person. And what we're going to be able to show you is exactly what he did in order to make a 200-point swing in his credit score.
All right, let's go.
And the key is utilization. Believe it or not, this instance it's all about utilization. But we want to talk a little bit about what that actually means. Because utilization, if we don't understand what utilization is, we can't possibly understand the principle of what's going on here. And so the most important thing for us to kind of start out with is understanding that utilization is the percent of your available credit that you are currently using. Let's say you have one credit card that has an available credit limit of $1,000, which means you can only charge $1,000 on this thing before they cut you off. That's your total available credit. If you have a balance of $500 on that $1,000 credit limit, you've got a utilization of 50%. $500 divided by $1,000. All right, so here is the thing we want you to learn, and we're going to show it in action. Every 10% of your utilization means 10 to 15 points on your credit score, which means that if you drop your utilization 10 percentage points, you should see a 10 to 15 point improvement in your credit score regardless of where your credit score currently is.
Over what period of time? So you drop your 10% of utilization. When do you see that bounce?
Almost immediately. So if I drop my utilization from 50% to 40%, next month, when the credit bureaus report that to the credit bureaus, I should see a 10 to 15 point improvement in my credit score, regardless of whether my current score is a 550 or a 750. There's not a lot in your credit report that has that direct a relationship, but credit utilization is. And that's why at the Yukon project, we don't keep parroting back this idea that your utilization has to be under 30%. Because the reality is, if your utilization is 50% and you move it to 40%, you get that same 10 to 15 points. If your current utilization is 30%, you may look around and say, hey, look, I'm good. Everybody says 30% is perfect. But if you move it down to 20%, you will improve your credit score 10 to 15 points.
And here's one of the biggest things I've learned is, and Jonathan said this early on, is at the reporting date. You may think you are paying off your credit card or paying it down, but you do it after the reporting date, which means when they report your credit utilization, you're not actually getting the benefit of what you're doing. So you need to pay attention to that.
That's a really important point because utilization doesn't mean debt. It can mean the balance you're carrying. All it means is the balance that is reported at the time that the entity is reporting your utilization. And so I think that's really important. Usually it's the statement. And that's why one of the other tricks that you can do to lower your utilization is to make your credit card payment twice a month instead of just when it's due. Because then you're going to have the amount of balance, even if you're paying it off in full every month.
And just to be clear, we're not saying pay more. We're saying more frequently break up your payments.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into Logan and show them some real data.
All right.
And exactly what he did, the secret to literally reducing the potential interest rates he pays by 100
Yeah.
like cutting it in half.
So this is Logan. It's not his real name, but this is real, honest to goodness credit data from TransUnion from a real credit report. So what we want to do is kind of show you what he did. And he started out with a credit score of 548. 548 is not great, right? When it comes to a 548, you probably can't get, well, you definitely can't get a mortgage. You can't get a car loan. You'd be hard pressed to get any kind of a personal loan. And if you did get a personal loan, it would be very expensive.
Can you use real numbers versus very expensive? Tell people like what that means in real interest rate. So if you're at a 548, are you paying 30% plus potentially on a personal loan?
No, you're paying 160%, and you're probably only being approved for at the most a couple of $1,000 because it's going to be a short-term loan, because the lender is not really confident that you'd be able to pay it over time. And so these are short-term loans, limited balances, and very expensive.
And again, remind people if you have over a 700 on your credit score, that interest rate goes from what to what?
Well, with inflation the way it is right now, and the interest rates where they are, it's probably in the neighborhood of 8%. So that gives you an idea of just how dramatic it is. You're talking about saving not just hundreds, but thousands of dollars of interest expense if you can move your credit score from the 500s to the 700s.
All right, well let's give people the magic of what Logan did.
All right, check out Logan's credit score over time. So this is capturing data every 2 months of Logan's credit score. And you can see that he starts out at 548. And you can see that almost immediately by month 9 or 8 months into this journey, he's up to 720. And then he's able to maintain between a 720 or a 680, that band, for the next 10 months. And so fairly consistently. And so what we really want to know is, what did he do from month 2 to month 9 that got him there?
He must have changed a lot. I mean, it must have been many things he changed, right?
Well, Logan made a phone call.
Made a phone call, folks. One phone call.
So Logan made one phone call and moved his credit score from a 580 to a 720. But let me walk you through how we know that. So check out this. The dotted line is his credit utilization. And you can see that he had a credit utilization of above 90% for the first several months. And then all of a sudden it magically dropped to about 24%.
He must have made a big payment.
One of the things that we can be sure of in that early slow decline is that he's making his minimum payments to his credit card. And we know that because the balance is coming down at a very consistent rate, and he's making that payment every time. And so you can see that if he just continued the way he was going to eventually pay off his credit card, but it was going to take several years because that slope is not very steep, right? So let's find out, how do we know that Logan didn't make some big payment against his credit card and therefore solve the problem? This is Logan's balances on his credit card. It is fairly consistent, and that slope hasn't changed.
One thing I'll point out with Logan that he did correctly is he didn't get behind. He paid the minimums. He had good discipline. That was phase 1, but that's not what caused him to go from 548 to over 700 in the blink of an eye.
And that's a really
one
important
phone call.
Yes, and I think that's super crucial because he was making improvements to his credit score because he was staying on time. So let's take a look at that. His utilization and his balance seem to be awfully in line, which means his credit limit was $1,000 until month 9. We know that because his utilization and his balances were right in line. And what I think is fascinating is in month 7, Logan does something.
Makes a phone call.
Logan makes a phone call in month 7, and that phone call drops his utilization from 90% to 24%.
And what was the phone call?
So Logan picked up the phone and called his credit card and said, "Hey, listen, I've been paying on time very consistently. I only have a credit limit of $1,000. Will you increase my credit limit?" And that credit card gave him a credit limit of $3,500. And so all of a sudden, $800 on a $3,500 credit limit drops that utilization to 24%. And you'll notice that one of the things Logan does very well, he raised his credit limit and he did not increase the amount he owes. One of the temptations is to raise your credit limit and then start charging again. And Logan does not do that. He just continues to make his payments. And you can see that line continues to go down a little bit. But the dramatic thing was that his utilization collapsed.
Phase 1 for Logan, make your payments on time, pay the minimums. Build some trust with your credit card, which means first you have to have a credit card. Second of all, don't be afraid to ask.
The worst thing they can say is no. But in Logan's case, they said yes, and it dramatically improved his credit score. I mean, this is going back to that graph we saw a little bit earlier. You can see that his credit score was improving because he had a history of on-time payments. He was making the on-time payments. He wasn't missing a payment, and so his credit score was coming up. But the dramatic jump and staying up is because he dropped his utilization.
So let's wrap it up, because this is such an important point. We don't really have a lot more to say besides make a phone call. Where can they find the phone number to call? Where can they find that? That's important. Where's the phone number?
You probably, almost certainly you can find it on the back of your credit card, but you can also find it on your statement.
Exactly. So if you have a low credit score and you are making your payments on time, step number 1, call your credit card and get them to increase your credit limit.
And step 2, continue making your payments. Do not use that credit limit, because if you use it, your utilization is going to go up again. So don't use whatever they give you. Even in emergencies, do what you can to make sure that you have your savings on the side so that you don't have to increase your utilization. And if you do that, you will see an immediate jump in your credit score.
Yeah, what an amazing toolkit if people just understood the ins and outs of how credit scores were built, which hopefully over time we will be able to demystify and help people so they can literally lower your interest rate payments. Lower your debt payments, because that puts more money in your pocket. Then use that money to pay down your balances and get out of the pressure of having debt. Use the tools that are there for your benefit.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit, because what a lot of people talk about this idea of, hey, credit score is just a way of getting you into debt. Don't play the game, right? You hear that a lot. Don't play the game and you're going to be fine. The reality is, this is the game you're forced to play, right? If you need to find an apartment, they're going to check your credit. If you need to rent a car, they're going to check your credit. If you need insurance, they're going to check your credit. So you can tell yourself all day long that you want to opt out of the game, but the game is tightly enmeshed in everything that we do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. What's going on is society is trying to find a way in order to make a lot of these financial tools available to everyone. And the only way they can do that is to have a system like credit scores and credit reports that can be standardized across everybody. So even if you're never going to borrow money again, you owe it to yourself to maintain a good credit score. But if you are going to borrow If you need to borrow for your next car, if you want to buy a house, in both cases, it will always be more expensive for you. And we're talking hundreds and thousands of dollars. And in a case of a house, tens of thousands of dollars more expensive to you to take out that loan with either no credit score or a low credit score.